kind of done doing this, but
You're never done with your with God.
apparently Jason didn't want to do it anymore, so he ran for a higher office. I don't think I'll get there. This is a combination of thoughts between all of us, writings from Jason's article over the years. I did edit a couple of them, which I don't think I ever would edit something that Jason had written, but here it is. Our mother, Cindy Kennedy, lived a full and wonderful life. She was born January 26, 1952, to Betty and Charles Donald. She has two siblings, Deborah and David. She graduated from Vestal High School, where she met Jason and my father, Bruce Lay. My mother was a young mother at the age of 19. She has always believed that the life of a child is a special gift, no matter the circumstance. In June of 1971, Mom hit a deer with her car. At the time, she was approximately 5 months pregnant. As a result of the collision, the young Mom's abdomen was struck by the steering wheel with significant force, and it caused her water to break. And 1971 is different than now. So even now, it would be a traumatic thing health-wise, probably handled differently than then. My mother was admitted to the hospital, and doctors began to review her condition, and perhaps more importantly, the condition of the unborn child. At 19 years old, she was faced with the prospect that her unborn child had been hurt in the automobile accident. The doctor told her that at minimum she needed to be on bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. But in his professional opinion, the doctor indicated that the unborn child had likely been severely injured, and as a result, she should think or consider the possible brain damage, and he recommended that she would terminate the pregnancy due to the medical condition. Scared and heartbroken at 19, Mom faced a terrible decision. All the hope, joy, anticipation of the upcoming birth of her first child had been turned and twisted by the cruel hands of fate into uncertainty, fear, and agony. Our grandma, Donald, was there to provide support and console her, and to provide advice, as Mom always did for us, many times unsolicited. There was also an elderly nun stopped by the hospital to provide spiritual counseling. Mom received the same advice from both the mother and the nun. Life is sacred, and she needed to trust in God. She refused to follow the medical advice, and in the 7th month of her pregnancy, after a difficult labor, which included the use of forceps to pull the child from the womb, her son was born. When Mom saw the baby, she was a little scared. As a result of the use of the forceps, his head was cone-shaped. Because he was premature, his skin was yellow, caused by the jaundice, and the baby boy had to stay at the hospital for a period of time for observation and treatment. In the end, as we know, he's a healthy child named Jason Jeremy Lay. As I said, this is an edited version of Jason's story, back when he was the DA. But it's a glimpse of what life meant to our mother. She was faced with a choice, and that was being encouraged by the doctors. But, as we all know, Mom fought for herself. If only those doctors could see him now, they would be as proud as she is, as what he's become. A few years later, after she was graced with me, as sometimes happens, my mother and father split. After a few years of struggling as a single mom of two, one very good at, well, let's say pushing the limits. She met her husband, Thomas Connery. They married and proceeded to have 3 more children. A healthy boy and girl, Sean and Sarah, and a baby boy who did not survive. Here's another column by Jason. I remember being in the hospital when she lost that little baby. She still delivered the baby, a little baby boy, with the knowledge that he was no longer alive. From what I recall, he had not made it to full term. I cannot really say what happened to him, and I'm not sure that anyone ever knew. After the delivery, my mother and stepfather and my brother and I came to the hospital room to say goodbye to the little brother that we never knew. Time plays tricks with memories, but I have a vivid recollection of that night. My mother was still in her hospital bed when my stepfather brought us into the room. She smiled at us as if to reassure us that she was fine, but the smile never touched her eyes. There was a deep sorrow there that I now know no man will ever truly comprehend. I saw that little hospital bassinet sitting at the side of her bed with a tiny little boy resting there, so peacefully and so perfect in every little detail, and he was not breathing. From what I can recall, he was around 5 to 6 months old. I remember that my mother kept his footprint in a small china piece on her hutch. And my sister later told me that the footprint measured about 1 inch in length. My mother encouraged us to move a little closer to her in the bassinet. And she then told us that her little brother was in a better place and that God had called him home. She told us that she wanted us to see him, and she wanted us to remember him. She reaffirmed what I was thinking, just how perfect he was, like a little play doll etched in exquisite detail. In her pain and her sorrow, she used her tears to teach us a lesson. She told us that we would find people in this world who would tell us our brother was not a baby, just a fetus or a mass of cells. She needed for us to know the truth, as if my brother's death would serve a greater cause by making his older brothers understand the sacredness of life. Our mother never let any of us forget about our brother who did not make it. He was often spoke of and remembered. She kept his tiny footprints in a glass case on her hutch. She was able to get an ultrasound picture of him from her doctors at a very late age. When my mother passed away and laid to rest, those pieces of him are tucked in with her, along with her dog. Remember, life is sacred, and she felt that way about her animals. I'll digress for a second. That was Jason's version of that day. Very close to my recollection, I remember as well how perfect that little boy was. And as cruel as maybe some people would think, doing that to, and I don't remember how old we were, but we weren't teenagers. You know, we were in elementary school, and some people would say that was maybe questionable parenting. But it stuck in my mind forever. And obviously, Jason's also. I'll get back to where I was. There are no words on how to describe the person that she was. She had a heart of gold. She helped those in need, even if it meant she went without. Each time she would help someone, she always said, "It's another jewel in my crown for when I get to those pearly gates." If you spend any amount of time around my mother, then you would know what she thought about whatever topic came up. This past election year, I thought about her often. I could imagine just last evening's discussions around the house, what that would have turned out. However, she always stood up for what she believed in and would debate you to the end. I would wager that's one of the reasons why Jason's such a good lawyer. There wasn't a holiday meal that there wasn't a discussion quite heated on any topic that came around. Sometimes I wonder if she took a stance just to see where he would go with things. Every weekend was a community gathering at our house, filled from Friday till Sunday. And through the years, some different faces came and went. But in the end, she found the best group. And that group ended up becoming family. A couple of them are here tonight. Or today, excuse me. I always thought of Mom as the strongest woman I've ever known. All the way up to her end. She always told stories growing up as her being a tomboy down in Weston. With bloody knees and climbing trees and sneaking out at night through a window. One story always stood out to me the most. She claimed to be about 13 years old. And as a tomboy, she didn't dress up very much, but for whatever reason, I can't remember exactly why, she had to get dressed up for school that day. And her mom had her a beautiful dress and did her hair, and she had shoes and all that. And she's on her way to school. She was told, "Do not get that dress dirty." So on her way to school, she crossed paths with some not so nice fellas who were in the neighborhood and decided to harass her a little bit about being all dolled up that day. Today we would call this bullying. Probably run home and turn people in. But that's not the way that she handled it. After some words, she decided that she needed to take care of this and give, in a shorter term, to give this kid a knuckle sandwich, so to speak. But she couldn't get dirty. So what's a girl to do? Well, she claims, again, I wasn't there. She claims, I've heard the story many times over the years, she claims she took her dress off right there, laid it out neatly so it didn't get dirty, and proceeded to give him a little what he wanted back. Get dressed back up and head off to school. That's the kind of strength that she had. And I always remember her as strong. She always worked multiple jobs at a time when Jason and I were little. And after she married Tom, she was trying to raise all four of us and decipher Tom's bookkeeping methods for his two businesses. That was probably the hardest job she ever had. Mom started to struggle with her health in the late 80s. Everybody's version is a little bit a little bit different. You start to think, well, the cigarette smoking is catching up. She's not quite in shape. Maybe that's part of it. She was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which again, in the early 90s, the fibromyalgia was like, is this even real? Is it something that even exists? Or are you just making it up because you not really a test for it, not really anything you can do for it, so it's just one of those things. But it kept her from doing certain things, and it seemed each year she could do less and less. She could not walk distances, but she could tell you when there was a storm coming, days before it would hit. In 2008, she was hit with pneumonia. This took a toll on her physically, and she could never recover from it fully. Again, she was a lifelong smoker, so nobody really thought anything of it. This is what's going to happen. She began struggling to get cups out of the cabinet, not being able to switch the laundry from washer to dryer. It began to decrease her ability of walking up the stairs and getting in and out of chairs. Now, she never let on that she couldn't handle doing things. Never once turned me down and watched my boys. She began seeing more and more doctors than we could ever even remember. I had so many tests done to rule things out, trying to figure out what was going on. All the while, she had found her way into the internet, and she was on WebMD doing her own diagnosis. During this show, he said, "I hope it's not Lou Gehrig's disease." Before her last and final trip to the Florida Keys, she had a muscle biopsy. This trip was not like the others to the Florida Keys. She was not able to walk Duval Street in Key West. That's a kind way of saying hit all the bars. Or even walk the beach, which she loved, and get her toes in the sand. Shortly after that trip, that was usually around Christmas time, they would go down. And I remember she went to Rochester in January, so it was less than a month, to get the results from her biopsy. That's when we all got the news. We all have our own memory of that horrific phone call. And she had ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And there's nothing they can do besides take medicine to slow the process down. Well, this was 7 years ago, and there's been some advancements, but still not much they can do. But that evening, talking with Sarah, she quoted Tim McGraw. She said, "I did not go skydiving or Rocky Mountain climbing or ride a bull, but I lived my life. And there's a lesson that God wants me to learn." Shortly after her diagnosis, she asked Jason to write up a living will. She and Jason had had this discussion over and over through the years. My mother always said, if I can't do things for myself, I don't want to be here. Jason, being a good son, did what his mother requested. But on a Friday night, when he went to her house, again, it's Friday night, surrounded by laughter, friends, pizza, beverages, Jason had brought his brother-in-law along to give a little chiropractic adjustment, because that must be why I'm having trouble breathing. He decided not to do the living will. Too many people are hung. I'll come back tomorrow. But tomorrow did not come. 10 days after diagnosis, her mother went into respiratory failure. that night, late night, early morning, and she had a battle. She put a battle up with Tom and Sarah. They were trying to get her to go to the hospital. Her oxygen levels had dropped incredibly. She was not going to the hospital. She was a proud woman. She did not want the whole town to know that something was up. She did not want an ambulance call. Luckily, Tom was the chief of the fire company. He made a few phone calls, got the ambulance, and they made the trip to the hospital themselves. She was doing a little bit better in the hospital, but once they took the oxygen off, her levels dropped again. Our mother fell into an unconscious state. And when arriving to the ER, they had to sedate her and put her on a ventilator. We began to pray as a family, and the doctors asked us whether we wanted to turn off the machine and see what happens. We had a very difficult family meeting. One that I hope nobody ever has to have. We all knew that Mom never wanted to live that way, but in the end, we decided that if she was still competent, and the doctors were sure that she was, if they brought her out of the coma, then it would be her decision, not ours. Maybe that was a cop-out, but in the end, that's what we did. When she came out of the coma state, she was quite bitter about it. She did not understand what happened, why we did what we did. But without the ventilator, her diaphragm muscles weren't strong enough to bring oxygen in and out. So we tried to rehabilitate her to the point that she could handle the breathing on her own. We went to a different hospital, tried rehab for months. We had no success. We fought all new battles between insurance companies, resources. Luckily, we had signed a gas lease to help the financial end. Finally, we were able to bring her home. But the battle was not over. In some ways, it had just begun. We had family, friends, and caregivers all set up. We had family, friends, and caregivers all set up. Thank you. All set up, like I said. We had a great circle of friends. Could never have done it without them. We had caregivers all set up to help us with Mom. It was not life as any of us knew it, but soon routine settled in. Friday nights still were Friday nights. It was just a little different. Still laughter, still food, still fellowship. During this time at home, she was able to enjoy Easter, renew her vows with her husband, and go to the St. Lawrence River. She was able to celebrate the birth of Jesus and welcome a new granddaughter into the world. All of this while confined to a bed, relying on everybody for everything. It was not what she would have said was living just a year before. ALS had took over, and she could not move. She was fully aware of her surroundings, could still debate, very interested in Fox News and QVC. she was still enjoying life. My mother knew her time was coming to an end. She had informed us all on March 27th, 2010, that her mother had come to visit her. Her mother had passed in 1971 or 72. So we knew it was time for her to go. She had a chance to speak to all of us who came home and even some that couldn't. Our mother, grandmother, and for many friend passed away peacefully at home on the morning of March 29th, 2010. A year prior to that, we were close to saying goodbye to our mother. It was a year and 3 months in January when we were in that hospital making that decision. But during that last year, with her, we all remembered her thanking us each day. Each day that we gave her an extra day. Each memory that was able to be made. Earlier she had said, God had a lesson to teach her. But we believe, once again, that she was teaching us. Just as she showed those boys their little brother. She thanked us and loved us for, once again, choosing life. I thank you all for coming year after year. It means a lot to all of us.